In this video I'm going to show you how you can make a spline shader to bring your vector artwork in from Illustrator directly into Cinema and create a resolution independent shader, which means that if I Command R here, you can see that's nice and sharp, but also, unlike if it was a bitmapped, if I zoom right in on here, Command R again, you'll see it's still nice and sharp, which you're not going to get if you turn it into a bitmap. Right, let's turn to Illustrator, show you where to begin. So do your bit of artwork in Illustrator, and if you see this isn't quite, I haven't bothered sort of totally finishing this. I've got strokes and things on there, but what I've done is copied and pasted it into a new document, which I've then cleaned everything up so that it's just outline vector artwork. You'll also see I put a square around the outside of it, and this is quite important when you bring it into Cinema. If you've got a square format in the splines that you bring in and all your detail is in the middle of it, whatever happens, as long as you put the coordinates in for a square, you know that the thing is going to be undistorted, because it can be a problem if you bring it into Cinema and you're not sure what the exact dimensions are and you start scaling it, it can go a bit skewy. The other thing to bear in mind is that you see with the square highlighted there's a centre point in the middle there, is to adjust your rulers. I'll Command R, there you go, show you where they are. And then the top left hand corner here you've got a little square which is for the centre of the ruler coordinates, can't speak. And if you snap that to that centre point, then your 0 on the axis for your transform is in the middle of your document. So obviously I've made the artboard fit that square, and then you save the document as Illustrator 8. I've named it AI8 Spline. So I've made one before, but I'll show you the process. So save that. I'm just going to replace, yes I will, and you need to save it as Illustrator 8 because then it's saved as an EPS rather than a PDF, and that means that Cinema can understand it. So switching back to Cinema, we'll open a new document, make sure it's in millimeters, which it is, and we're going to go Command O to open our spline file. So it says all that nonsense, you can ignore all that, just click OK. I thought it did that, it switches to centimetres, not quite sure why, but that makes sure my document's millimetres. Right, so now we don't need our outer square anymore, so we can delete that. And if we highlight everything, select children so that we've selected absolutely everything, then we can go to connect objects and delete, which now means we've got a single path with all our vector artwork on it. I'm going to call that logo, so that's a nice thing to call it. Right, now let's shrink that down a bit. You see this is coming silly small size after saying that about bringing the square in. But if I go T to scale, I'm going to blow that up a bit because I want it to be, I don't know, probably around 100 or something, so that it will fit nicely on a cube, which I'm going to throw in there. So throw in a cube. That's a 200mm cube, so that's fine. I'm going to just shift that over, move things around a bit so you can see both. That looks a bit naff, so I'm going to put a fillet on there. Bring that down a bit just so that it looks okay. Right, now we're going to make the shader. So if we double click in the materials editor, bring up a new material, go to the alpha channel, and under the texture drop down we go to effects, spline. And by default you'll see the rather ugly AB text thing going on there. So what we need to do now is to turn off the text function, which is hidden down here, and that then activates the spline holding box which we have here. And unsurprisingly, we can drop our logo spline into the spline field. You can just see what's happening there. Now there's a load of offsets and scale stuff going on here. You'll probably need to put 50% in all of these just to get the thing to fit nicely. I'm going to change our preview there to a plane so we can better see what's going on. Right, now we need to turn off caps, turn on fill, use fill color, we'll need to do that. So we need background texture, that needs to be a color, and because we're using it as an alpha, this needs to be our black, however you do it, so that's fine. We need a fill texture for the actual logo itself. That's going to be white. Let's see what we've got here. It's still looking a bit messy. Oh, that's because we've got that line width thing going on. So turn the line width down to 0 because we don't want any, in effect it's a stroke, we don't want the, any line width on there. And you can see roughly up here we've got our logo appearing. Now I'm going to give it a colour so it'll look nicer that way. I'm not going to worry about the size of it at the moment, although you could probably size it down here using the scale as well. One way of doing it, but just so you can see it nicely in the preview, I quite like to keep that at 50%. I'm going to call that logo as well so we know which one it is. So that's good. Right, now when we put this on our cube, because it's an alpha, you see everything disappears. So we'll double click, make another material, put that on the cube, and then put our logo material to the right of it, because it reads left to right, like bottom to top. And you can see there it is, that's worked. But the great thing about this, because the spline is actually being read in the shader from the spline object, it means that we can edit the spline any which way we want to, and it will update automatically inside the shader. So if I hit T to transform, I can blow that up a bit. And what I'm going to do is to put the interactive render region on, because one thing I've found on this is that it tends not to update the preview in the viewport immediately, always, when you do that. But you can get around it, say, by using the interactive render region, but you might find that underneath this, it's still, yes, it's still showing it small. Another little thing I've found, because this is rather irritating, is that if you go into the material itself and highlight editor, where it's got the texture size, if you just change that from one to the other, it will update it, and that seems to be the only way I could get it to update every time, but it's a small price to pay. So let's get rid of our render region, and there we are. We've got a shader on there which is resolution independent. Obviously you can do what you want with it, how you place it, but that's basically how it works. So you can actually do any kind of cinema editing you like to the spline. Not there's a huge amount you can do, but you could actually go to the spline and create outline. It's an interesting one to do, and if you just stick like a millimetre or something in there. And then again, you'll need to either use the render region or refresh it to get it to refresh. And there we go. So obviously, once you've got that in there, if you want to update your Illustrator artwork, you can go through the same process again and actually resave it from Illustrator and re-import it into Cinema, which is a bit of a long workaround, but it does mean that you end up with a vector shader rather than a bitmap one, which means that it's always going to be nice and sharp, which is quite a bonus. So I hope you found that useful. I'll see you with another Cinema Bite later.